Right, okay. Good afternoon, everyone. We'll just start because this is live on YouTube. So we'll just start now so that we don't waste time. And I understand that this is your Sunday, so we can get ahead. So, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining this session on branding the city. My name is Adrian Okupe. I'm a tourism advisor and I am a senior advisor at Red Clay. And today, joining me are Fisayo Bakare of Yellow of Lagos and Mr. Lawon
Hi, guys.
Adams, hi, and of Loving Lagos. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Our topic today really is on branding the city, and branding the city is quite important for businesses, for residents, and also tourism in terms of the type of image that a city portrays. And over the course of an hour, we're going to look at what branding can mean for Lagos, what branding has existed in Lagos over time, and how for the future we can really start to contribute to the perception of Lagos in terms of for attracting businesses, for attracting residents. I don't know if they want to attract residents, but also for attracting investments. And this is very important, particularly with what has happened in Lagos over the last couple of weeks with EndSARS protests. I feel like it's important as well to have a conversation on how do we also quantify the type of image that goes out of our city and how are we responsible for that. So anyway, the panel is going to have both Fisayo and Mr. Adams, and we're going to go through this over the course of an hour. If you have any comments, please use the chat box. If you have any questions, please raise your hand and I can then allow you to ask the question later on. So without much ado, I'll first of all start with you, Fisayo. Can you tell me a little bit more about the Yellow of Lagos and what really made you decide to start Yellow of Lagos?
It's very funny that today marks the 4th year that the Instagram page started, and it was in the advent of the downturn of the economy in 2016 that I thought to myself, there's no way I'm going to be traveling across the shores of Africa. I wasn't even thinking about the time to have my summer holiday. And because of the economic downturn, I started becoming more introspective into the city and seeing ways in which I could entertain myself from a tourist standpoint. And that's where I began thinking about Lagos. It was specifically the 30th of September, 2016, that I thought to myself, well, Lagos is going to transform itself into a green, white, green state where the flags, our national flags, are going to be laced across all the streets in Lagos. And I was like, it's going to be for that one day and everything in Lagos is going to return to normal. And so I thought to myself, let me start harnessing what I think Lagos represents through a yellow lens, as inspired by the Dampo, the Keke, and the taxi. And so I began for a month going across the city, and the more I looked, the more yellow I found. Enough for me to create a different platform from where I was already curating these yellow inspired images. And I started literally 4 years ago today, on documenting what it meant to live, thrive, and work in Lagos through a yellow lens.
Thank you for sharing that. And I think it's what a coincidence to mark 4 years today.
Right. Yeah.
Presentation. That's really amazing. So thank you for that, Fisayo. Mr. Adams, can you just share a little bit about the Loving Lagos? I like, Yellow of Lagos and Loving Lagos. So can you share a little bit about why you started it and your experience so far?
Yes, very similar theme, only that in my own case, I woke up one day and decided to take I think my daughter was about 10 or 11 then, and I decided to take her around Lagos. And I'd always been telling her how I knew all the nooks and crannies and all of that. But on that particular trip, I ended up learning so much myself. And it made me realize that there's so much to learn from this city. There's the bit that you think you know historically, and there's the bit that you begin to learn when you start to hear the accounts of the people. Just like I was listening to your journey this morning, riding the bike, and how you discovered different. And that's just how it is. You keep discovering new things in Lagos, and it's and from that point on, we started taking friends and family around Lagos, showing them around Lagos, and the response was so encouraging. We decided, since nobody is really taking this on at least the way that I would pay for it, decided, okay, let's make some form of business out of this, and encourage, find the kind of people that would add value to us. We, at a very early stage, realized that we would need to invest in real estate. We needed to own or at least have access to some places that we wanted to take the people to, because that was a challenge. And we're eventually where we are now with Loving Lagos. So essentially, it's a tourism tour site company, touring company, and we focus on Lagos metropolis, and we just try and find the beautiful places and beautiful and good things to do in the city, basically.
No, thank you for that. And I've been to the Loving Lagos site in Lagos Island, which is on Military Street, just as you enter Military Street. And so if you're listening and you haven't been, I'll encourage that you go to check it out. So I'm still going to stay with you before I go to Fisayo, because you spoke about how yours was from a tourism perspective, and you wanted to really start to promote and amplify the different experiences that you have seen in Lagos and some of the sites of what it means to love Lagos. So let's talk about this branding the city. How would you say Loving Lagos is trying to contribute towards the identity of Lagos?
Yes, like I said, even starting from the name, when you look at Lagos and its being, you would look at a city of what, 20 million people? A state of 20 million people, and you wonder how does it show? How do you sell a welcoming, peaceful, a vibrant city and a vibrant space in all of that? And we thought, okay, let's start with the name, Loving Lagos. That should at least get people curious. And looking at tourism, looking at branding itself, it starts with the name. You have to coin a logo, and the logo's got to capture everything that you want to describe in the city or in the state or whatever. So we thought, let's start with Loving Lagos, and then we'd start to sell the idea, sell the project to people. But by and large, branding Lagos, you would be considering what branding is, and internationally you'd look at branding and how it has worked in other cities and all of that, especially in Europe. But I felt that branding Lagos, there had to be not just your normal, you look at the space, you look at the people in the space, their energy. What are the good things? What are the beauty of Lagos? The music, the food, the fashion, and all of that. The art, and how vibrant, how young, how refreshing it is. Yes, that's one story of Lagos. But you cannot. It's not the whole story. The whole story has got to also do with its past. Mm-hmm. And its past, you talk about Africa. In its past, you talk about West Africa, and all the challenges that this part of the world has gone through, before you can connect it, and for people to really appreciate when they see talent coming out of Africa, whether it's in the movies, is in the fashion, is in all these things, let them really know where it's coming from. That it hasn't come easy. It hasn't come on a platter of gold. It hasn't come from just going to a school and then getting grants and all of that. It's been extremely difficult. Lagos is survival of the fittest. You have 20 million people going at the same opportunities. So it's a dog-eat-dog world, and people have to. So for every Davido they see, they must know that there's 100,000 in the background trying to climb up. For every Mofedamijo or whoever they want to see, they must know that there are about 1 million actors trying to climb up. For every gallery, for every relay gallery that you find, you know that there's so many other side hustlers displaying artworks everywhere. And that has to add to the story, in my own, the way I see it.
Okay, thank you for that. And I think that it's very important because when you look at Lagos as it is now, it's really a melting pot, and we really are trying to talk about how we should be resilient. We need to be very celebrate our resilience, celebrate all our tenacity, etc. And sometimes you wonder if this is not almost like a, glorifying of stress and glorifying of, like, oh, just continue to enjoy the stress and the tension and the pressures in Lagos. And, it's also very tricky because then you might want to fall into the danger of just using that as the branding for Lagos, right? And the branding for the city, that Lagos is this frenzied city/metropolis where everyone is just running after everyone. And so it's important that we're also careful about that. So Fisayo, you're an interior architect, right? And you're a design professional. So I'm looking at this because, that's been your trajectory before you also started Yellow of Lagos, which tries to infuse some branding. I like the coffee table book that you released.
Yes.
I think it was last year. Yes, that was also very nice. And to be honest, whenever I look around Lagos now, I see yellow, and I was like, oh my goodness, yellow is the color for Lagos. Can you tell me a little bit more about what Yellow of Lagos is trying to do in terms of branding Lagos, and some of the examples you have seen around the world of how they have also tried to brand a city with color, by its color, for example. Yeah.
Okay, so for me, I believe that branding a city is best if you coin either a phrase or look at a catch, like a word. And I believe that, as was rightly said earlier, that Lagos is a city of hustlers. It is a city of hustle, where everyone is literally here for a dream and the execution of that dream. In Paris, for example, I wouldn't say that it's branded by a particular color. I believe it's branded by a feeling. Paris is the city of love, right? You have the Eiffel Tower, and you have a tourist attraction where tourists come with padlocks and they put their names or they inscribe their names on padlocks, and it's kind of there, held in the city. I believe New York is a place for dreams. People, just like Lagos, go there. They're not counting bridges. They're there for a mandate, either in the culture space, in the art space. And although we have different colors that go through the city, the subway, the integration, I don't even know why I'm choking on this word. Integration, that's the word I was looking for. Integration of the subway system, the buses, the taxis, and how everything kind of overlaps on itself. I believe New York is the city where they're literally kind of like Lagos. They're hustling to get to a better dream and to achieve that dream. And it's also a city that never sleeps. And now Lagos, in branding the Lagos and in branding the city of Lagos, instead of saying it is for a culture or it is for a particular language or a particular tribe, because it's not, it's, as you rightly said, Adu, it's a melting pot. It was easier for me, from my own point of view, to look at it through the way we navigate the city. And the forms of public transportation available, mainly by and large, are yellow. The outgoing administration of Ambode tried to infuse blue, which met resistance from the Yellow of Lagos, not because of anything other than the preservation of history and how the city has already kind of formed itself as a yellow city, if you will. From the Mami wagons to the Molues, to the Damfos, we've always kind of had a yellow string that connects all of us, whether or not we're interfacing with the public systems. We see them. There is not a street that you wouldn't, if you see a Damfo, you will automatically think about Lagos. And I think it's the psychological relevance of these vehicles that kind of brand the city naturally. I hope that answered your question.
Yes, it does. And I think it's very interesting that you connected, the branding of Lagos to how people navigate Lagos, right? And it's that sense of movement through Lagos, so public transportation, etc. And perhaps that's something we can also learn from in terms of how branding can, take an element. It can be, like you said, it can be culture, it can be the spirit. New York is the big apple, concrete jungle. Your dreams are going to come alive in New York, Yes. But then staying with you a little bit, because branding has a purpose, right? So yes, we have Yellow of Lagos, right? And that's nice. But what is it trying to tell us about Lagos beyond just the color and how we navigate? So is it a dream? Is it something you can fulfill? Is it a vibrancy? Yellow is about joy, it's about energy, does that come? Was that part of your reflection on your branding?
The brand literally came as inspired by the Danfo, the Keke, and the taxi. But then as things were grouped under what Lagos is, under the lens of yellow, you begin to see culture and you begin to see music and you begin to see history. You begin to see everything that Lagos represents. And it's kind of like it invites you into a world of endless possibilities. And so if you were to see something within Lagos as a hustler's story or a hustler's narrative, it would be that it ends in something that is joyful. And it's the metaphor yellow now translates into joy. And so you completely apply yourself like the vehicle, like the wheels that keep moving on the bus to a destination that actually ends up in something that is joyful or something that gives you a sense of belonging because you have applied yourself to get to where you're going. It's usually largely said that Lagos or Nigeria as a whole is a place that you kind of invest and you have bountiful ROI, returns on your investment. And it's kind of like at the end of all the labor and the toil, there is that joy, there is that sunshine, as it were, there is that yellow at the end of that journey. So that's kind of the metaphor behind the brand as well.
Oh, wow. Thank you so much for sharing this. And I'm going to come back to you, but I'll just go back to Mr. Adams because, you know, he's into tourism. I know tourism is your side hustle, so to speak, but it's nice that you're into tourism, of course. And just connecting from what Fisayo has said in terms of this joy, right? This joy is this sense of hopefulness, which you have tried to then categorize as loving Lagos. And I'm talking about this because when we look at the tourism master plan for Lagos, and I'm sure you've seen it, it's the one that was prepared by EY, you know, there was,
yes.
I thought that it tried to look at certain tourism products, right? And tourism forms of tourism, but it hadn't really connected the spirit of Lagos in a certain way to say, okay, this is what Lagos means and this is what Lagos is. And I find as well that in cities around Nigeria, you know, we always say that there's a lack of branding. I mean, people even say Nigeria itself doesn't have a branding from a tourism perspective. So if you're looking at loving Lagos, and not even just loving Lagos alone, but let's expand a little bit to the wider lens of branding a city. What are the challenges you think we will have to surmount in terms of branding Lagos, and why? Yeah, let me talk about the challenges first, right? Because we don't have a brand for Lagos from a tourism point of view. Why don't we have a brand? What are the challenges we're dealing with? And then I'll come to Fisayo to talk about how perhaps we can solve some of these challenges. Oh, you're on mute, sorry, you're on mute. Thank you.
Yes. I said, I'd like to start by referring to a conversation I had with somebody, and they were talking about getting a company to come and brand, I can't remember if it was Nigeria or Lagos. And the project started with the airport. And the minute the guy landed and he looked at the airport and he was like, it's not going to work. Whatever I do for you in this city, it's not just going to work, you know. And for me, there are two lessons from that, you know. The idea of bringing someone to come and tell your story. I think for all the great minds that we have here, well-read, with the best of education, best of exposure, I don't think we need anybody to come and help us tell our story. More so when it's a story of history, how we got this far. I think we can do a pretty good job at that. And if we do make mistakes, of course, we'll correct them along the way. It's like a business, it's a going concern. So you've got the opportunity to make corrections, and that's part of the journey. That you make corrections. I mean, you have faults, and you make the corrections. Now, clearly, it's an uphill challenge to brand Lagos, because take for instance in your house, your establishment, your office. I was watching another of your sessions where a photographer was saying they try so hard not to capture the environment because the environment might be so messed up, and they only focus on the picture. But really, in their mind, deep in their minds, they're like, is that really the whole story? It's a challenge to tell the whole story of Lagos sometimes. That's why we just we focus on the intention, on the mindset, on the energy, on the passion. And that's really the story we tell. But we cannot but tell the true story. For instance, we got into this and we realized that, I mean, we're not going to start building new projects. We want to maintain and conserve and preserve existing structures so we can tell our stories from those structures. And it is what it is. Even the story of us as Africans, I mean, should we be shy to say we were enslaved and we were colonized? We didn't wish it on ourselves. It happened and it's part of our history. So we must say it. And I think, in my opinion, it gives us a seat on the table to tell our colonizers and the people that sold us for slaves that, look, we've got a big problem here. You've got to come and honestly help us fix it. We're not afraid. We're not ashamed of our history. We didn't force it on ourselves. And we must be proud to say that story. And that for me should capture what it is. That is, you have a society that is ready to go. It's vibrant. You go to some parts of Lagos, it's like anywhere else in the world. It's like New York, London, you know, name the places in the world. And then you go to some places and your heart is broken. Honestly speaking, even the New York has places like the worst parts of Lagos, but it's the way they brand and they showcase it. Well, you know, in life, you can say that's smart, but at the end of the day, the truth comes out. And we are at a stage, I think, for us in Africa, in Nigeria, where we can look forward and look at what everybody has done, and we can assess and say, do I want to take this route? Or should I just be open, let everybody know my problems, and we move on? And that, you know, so the challenge, you know, for me is, what route should we take? Should we just focus on the beautiful parts and skip and pause our recording lenses when we get to the horrible parts? Or we just say, you know, this is it, take me for what I am. I want to be a better person. I want to be a better country, better people. So that's what I have to say.
Wow, yeah, I think it's quite complex, you know, in terms of, and it is quite challenging, which is why we probably haven't made the journey the leap that we need to make. But, you know, when we think about branding a city, it's important that that branding is representative. It's important that it's not just for tourists, you know, it's important that it's for the residents as well. It's important that it's for investments too. And that, like Fisayo mentioned, it's important that it should also have a sense of what is the future vision or direction of this city. Now, I don't know what the future, anyway, I know that Lagos is trying to be a smart city, trying to be a resilient city, trying to do all of these things, but it's important that the branding of Lagos needs to also represent the soul of Lagos and be something that everyone can key into. Now, I don't know why we don't have it yet, because when I speak to different people, you know, when I speak to filmmakers, they tell me that, oh yes, you know, they understand that Hollywood, you know, has Brand USA that really contributes to how the stories are told of Hollywood. You know, we have Emily in Paris now about, you know, just talking about Paris. It really makes you want to go to Paris. You know, you had movies that just make us want to travel to somewhere. And the question is perhaps looking at branding, you know, there's a multidisciplinary approach or even multiple lenses that we need to look at. But the key for me is the system, you know, how do we connect these dots? And Fisayo, I'm coming to you, as you know, because, you know, you've spoken about connecting the dots through mobility, right? And I just think that there's so many other dots that we need to really try to connect before we can really tell a story that will, you know, take us somewhere. So for example, one branding phrase that I like is Incredible India. You know, I think that no matter where you go to in India, Incredible India sticks. And I can remember it as far back as over 15, almost 20 years ago, where it's just Incredible India or Malaysia, Truly Asia, or even Britain, Visit Great Britain, you know, something simple. I mean, those are tourism-focused branding. But then it's important for us to also then to say, how do we even brand Lagos for its residents? And why is this important? Branding for what? So, Fisayo, not just about Yellow of Lagos now, but just, you know, a bit more widely, like if we're looking into the future of the city, branding for what? And how do we start putting these multiple systems together?
Just to take you back, before you asked the question, you spoke about India and Malaysia, and these are countries.
I know.
And there's a peculiarity with Lagos being a city, and asking a question about a city and the gravity that has as it's weighing on a scale with another country, for example, India and Malaysia. I believe that there is a very, very unique opportunity in Lagos because it represents everything across board in Nigeria. We have suya, which came from the north. You know, we have so many different things at different times. We have our rainy season, which, you know, it's things change and shift. There's automatically more traffic in Lagos as a result of the fact that the season has changed. And then Agbaluma pops up during Harmattan. And so I think that it would be a little difficult if we're looking at our city through the functionality of other cities. We have our own peculiar challenges, and we have our own peculiar things that we're sorting out within Lagos State and within the country as at large. Now, how do we connect the dots? I believe it is the responsibility of every civilian, every patriot, to take on their own narrative. In as much as Lagos is a melting pot of culture, predominantly a lot of Yorubas historically had settled here. And that's why you would hear a lot of pidgin mixed with Yoruba language in Lagos. And that's just from a historic standpoint. We have colonial buildings, for example, that lace the street on that lace Broad Street. And because the administrative headquarters has moved to Abuja, a lot of these buildings are empty. I believe the Ministry of Tourism had, I think, 60,000 cupcakes baked for Lagos or for Nigeria at 60. And I thought to myself, okay, great. We had a pandemic. Cupcakes are going to do what exactly for us? And, you know, if you look at it as a whole, there are so many issues within the structure of our administration as a country that tourism is usually, by and large, at the back burner. And you see things like Nollywood rise and take on their own narrative, but then it's not translated. You see fashion rise and it takes on its own expression, but it's not translated across board. And so you start having pockets of development, but then there's no cohesive, intentional weaving of these silos that have kind of formed in the creative industry. I believe that there's being done with central bank in trying to rehabilitate the film industry or the creative industry with the National Theatre. But then this, if you look at history, it's kind of been a thing. This would be another time that they're trying the same thing. And I believe that part of why we're doing the same thing over and over is because we haven't taken time to go and document or to understand and understudy our history. History plays a very key role in who we are and what we know about ourselves. We had at the, during the looting of like that spiraled from the EndSARS movement, we had a lot of our history lost that can never be regained. A lot of our institutions have kind of taken the back seat because not much importance is placed on our cultural institutions, not as much as sports or entertainment, as music or as film. Sometimes fashion would kind of rear its head, but not as much as we put importance on entertainment and the entertainment industry. And we need to start looking introspectively to ask questions about why we're still on the streets rioting or looting or protesting, as it were, why there are buildings that are emptied in an administrative, where the administrative headquarters has moved to Abuja. Why do we have emptied buildings? You would see that there's a toss-up between the land belonging to the state of Lagos and the building that sits on that land belonging to the Federal Republic of Nigeria. And so that's why it's left empty. But these buildings could easily transform into creative meccas, if you will, or creative environments and hubs where people can live and work, people can go and have galleries. And you see this a lot in the Western world, where through gentrification or the moving out of a city, you would see rehabilitation in the emptied cities. But if you take a walk or you drive down Lagos Island, you would see a lot of buildings that have been left desolate. There shouldn't be a city where we have so many dreams that are supposed to be fulfilled and so many dreams that are born. Nobody comes to Lagos to count bridges. There should be a thing where even if we're not even able to pay for the rent of these buildings, whatever we are producing should cover the cost of living in these emptied buildings, because otherwise they're going to be left to rot. So we need to start thinking more intentionally, whether or not tourism is the thing that weaves this narrative together. I think we need to kind of look inward and look at our own selves and our industries and see how we can pass the baton to one another. Instead of creating monuments within each sector, we create a level playing field for collaboration across board, because the government is not going to come and help you. Neither is the West. I believe everyone is kind of facing their front lawn and trying to sort out what their issues are within the parameters of their country or their nation. So it's very unlikely that I would discourage us looking outward for help or looking outward for a narrative. We have the raw materials, we have the people, we have the ability to make the change that we are willing to see.
No, thanks, Fisayo. And I think that that's part of what makes it quite challenging, because what I think you've done for us here is really to identify all the challenges, but hopefully by the second part of this, we'll start talking about how we can navigate some of the opportunities. But some of what you said that I have some questions about is, who is responsible for branding the city, right? I find that a lot of the time we say it's the government, it's the government, it's the government, to the extent that if we have square pegs in round holes, for example, or if we have government that hasn't been able to do this, the challenge here is that perhaps all of us in our different professional fields can come together to start working to say, what does Lagos mean, and what should Lagos mean, and what should the direction of Lagos be? I think smart is good, but it's not enough. Resilience is good, but it's not enough. There needs to be something that is really about the future vision of this country or of this city. And to the extent that it hasn't been articulated for us, like Fisayo referred to the EndSARS movement, that perhaps it's our responsibility to also start to then craft what the vision ought to be. And that is really what branding is about. Branding is really about saying that, even if you brand your company, right, it's about saying this is who we are, this is where we're trying to get to, this is what we're about, this is how we want you to relate to us and how we want you to relate with us. And it has to be an internal internal approach. Yes, you can ask an external consultant for direction, but whoever the consultant is going to be asking you more about what it is that you want to do and how. And I guess that is my own reflection on what you said about it's time for us to do it ourselves. We're 60 years old, we're not young, and so it's time that we start to understand more about who we are and what we want to identify ourselves as. And I think it's particularly important for Nigerians. And I'm going to go to the comment that Jesus Amen. Jesus Amen said, I'm sorry if I'm not pronouncing your name well. He says that his friend, or he or she says, my friends abroad prefer to go to Ghana. Why? Because they see video content selling unique features. Nigeria is not projecting itself as such. Yellow of Lagos is a good start. And that is it as well. I think individually we all have responsibility on how we project. But then beyond that, I feel like these need to cascade to even journalism, what kind of stories come out of Lagos. People say Lagos isn't safe, and then you do the maths and you look at other parts of the world where there's a lot more danger, but people still travel there, right? And people still go there and people want to move there, to live there. So again, it's also about how in our different professions, we're really trying to brand Lagos in a positive light, not lying. Like you said, some places in New York, oh goodness, you wonder if you've just, transported back to hits of Charles Darwin's Oliver Twist. Charles Darwin? That's not the person that wrote Twist. Sorry. Who wrote Oliver Twist?
Right now, it looks like it's about
Charles
to rain.
Dickens.
Charles Dickens, thank you, not Charles Darwin. Thank you, Chuka, for listening. That was a test question. No, if you look at Dickens' Oliver Twist, you see that that's part of what, you see that some parts of New York still are like that. So it's not about saying that we should not represent ourselves, but we can choose what we select and market. So Mr. Adams, Fisayo has really mentioned all the challenges. And now I want to talk about the opportunities right? That we all have, different professionals, even like, the Lagos State Tourism Master Plan looked at, medical tourism. I don't know what your thoughts are on that. Cultural tourism, different forms of tourism. And even as we're talking about open house here, which is on architecture, it's also about the buildings, how are we using the buildings to brand the city as such? So what are the opportunities that you see? I mean, you have clearly seen an opportunity in Loving Lagos, but what other opportunities would you say exist?
Well, at a time like this, I mean, COVID has locked everybody in, so you start to look inwards for opportunities. The last time I checked, which was this morning, the population of West Africa was 405 million. Nigeria is half of that. Lagos is 20 million. And there are only 3 countries in West Africa that have a larger population than Lagos. That's the opportunity right there. Secondly, you've got everybody, you've got 100, you've got 700 languages, 371 ethnic groups in Nigeria. One can safely say that all of them are in Lagos. So they brought all that knowledge, all that passion. I mean, what more do you need in that melting pot to be creative? So you've got the market and you've got the people to deliver the goods. Like we have, more or less talked about all day long, it's just about organizing ourselves. And, we should give ourselves some credit as well. I mean, our Danfo boss in Loving Lagos was inspired by Yellow of Lagos, even though I've never met her. So you came into one of our Shukwashashore showings, and from that moment, we realized that we had a lot in common. That's the connecting the dots. Mm-hmm. It's not just government, it's the people, it's what they want, EndSARS riot, we discovered that some areas were boggled, some areas were looted, some weren't. When weren't they? People were protecting them, there are different reasons. And that's what we need to search our souls to find out that, look, it's our city. Yes, whatever reason, but it's our city and we have a duty to protect it.
Right.
We have a duty to protect it, and we might have a duty to make it blossom. And we don't have a choice, even for those of us that, not those of us, some of us that have dual nationality, it's become very obvious that you really only have one, because you've chosen to stay here for one reason or the other. You didn't go to the other place, or you've been going back and forth and you realize, what, I think it's sunny in Nigeria. I think I'll take my chances in Nigeria than going to those cold regions where COVID is going crazy right now. So this has helped us answer those questions. And when we know that you're stuck here, I mean, you have to find a way to make it work. And what we've always said is, we do it wonderfully individually, but now we need to challenge ourselves by doing it collectively. Mm-hmm. And this is where it starts from. And I think we shouldn't be discouraged if it's just a few people doing it. In any case, it's a few people really knows now. So if a few people do it well, others would see it and they would want to join, or they would assist you one way or the other, and then you begin to grow, and then it becomes a norm, then it becomes a culture. Then you ride that tide from there. So I think the opportunities are limitless. Maybe during the course of this conversation, I'll come up with more, but yeah. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And as you were speaking, actually, it really made me think about the fact that what we're talking about is the need to rebrand Lagos, right? Because even if you choose not to brand a space, over time, other things come to fill the void. So if you haven't articulated clearly what it is or what it is you want to do, other things will come to fill that void for us. So I'm going to throw it open to the audience here. Just in terms of your Lagos, can you just tell us what Lagos means to you? If you can just type that in the chat box as we speak. It'll be very interesting to see, what Lagos means to you now, and also what Lagos ought to mean in the future. So where do you think Lagos needs to go? But, I also think that because it's open house, we're talking about architecture here, buildings, and the culture within the space. I go through Lagos, and Fisayo, this is to you because you're also an interior architect. You go through Lagos, and even the houses, the buildings, the structures that we find in our city here, I'm not sure how, what story are we really trying to tell? What is the messaging that we're trying to, what identity? And then when you go inside, because we're talking about branding, yes, but I feel like even internally, there's something about connecting to your city from a sense of love, from a sense of identity. I find that lacking in the most part. So again, just bringing so I know that's not Yellow of Lagos, but bringing the interior architecture dimension. Why do we have this? Why do we have what we have? I'm not going to label it as anything.
I think in a bit to answer that question, it's about exposure. If we think about the history of how we have protected ourselves from the elements, it's literally used very natural materials, mud houses, thatched roofs, things that we see. And we've kind of evolved from there into cement and creating forts for our inhabitants and our offices. But I think usually what we do culturally is copy and paste. And we do that without going back to pay homage to the past. And so when I was doing my thesis, I was looking into the construction, Yoruba construction and architecture, and how they usually have internal circulation spaces or shareable spaces where everything externally is created like a fort. And then you have either a veranda that is looking inward or an interior garden within the building. And so it's enclosed in and of itself. We don't really have buildings like that. I believe that what we try to get validation from the West, instead of responding to our elements and to our own natural resources, we tend to, as much as possible, borrow and paste as opposed to copy and paste, because we still have brick and mortar for construction. But then with the Gen Z or the newer architects and designers coming in, there's always something that looks to the Western world for inspiration and for some sort of validation. And that kind of shapes the way we build and shapes the way our buildings look. If we're honestly to be inspired by what we have, as far as our natural resources or even the weather, if we have like a Harmattan house, for example, that responds to reducing dust coming into your building, I think it'll create more of a dynamic response to the way we build and the way we inhabit spaces. That's pretty much what I believe. I did school outside of the shores of Nigeria, which means that by and large, a lot of the culture that I was exposed to inspired and influenced my work. But then coming back home and moving back, it's kind of been a process for me to remove the things that were borrowed from other cultures and to build on the things that I believe would help elevate our own culture. Responding to sustainability issues, we've always kind of been upcyclers, recyclers. Nothing must waste in our homes, right? We have containers that are utilized for other things. And I think that's inherently who we are. We're people that kind of we extend the life of different products as long as we're able to continue to use those things. Nothing is actually waste. And if we start building in that way and we start building, responding to the elements, I believe that we will have an identity to the way we build and the way we then, from an urban or from an architectural standpoint, will then brand the city through that avenue.
Oh, wow, thank you. That's very powerful in terms of just connecting. I like the idea of a Harmattan house because I think that it's important that the buildings that we have should represent our own environment and the weather and how the weather changes. I feel like that's a challenge to those listening here, the architects, in terms of let's start coming up with how we think things should look. And like Mr. Adams said, we can learn so much from history. We can learn so much from how things have been done. And so we can come and look at it. It's just that sometimes I think to myself that, it's been nice for Lagos to start to have its own identity in terms of its buildings. Now it has its own identity in terms of the way buildings are, but rather it would be good to see some level of, more intentionality really in how we want to do it, and not, like you said, copy and paste or borrow and paste. And even when we come into the internal structures, really buildings and spaces that should really help us to harness the best out of our environment. It's interesting that you mentioned sustainability, because I think that whatever the branding or rebranding is going to look like, and like I said earlier, this rebranding is not just physical. I think that there's a mindset rebranding that needs to happen that will kickstart the different manifestations that we will then see, in film, in music, in culture, in fashion, in building, in everything, But I just want to go, before I talk about sustainability, I just want to read Shuka's comment in the chat box. I've been seeing quite a bit of comments, and I'll read some before I come to what Lagos means. So if you're talking about what Lagos means to you and what Lagos should mean, please keep it coming, and I will come to it later on. So Chuka says that he's of the opinion that the yellow color of Lagos is stolen from New York. First, because we tend to steal ideas from the West, which then brings me to the awful street signs that are borrowed from New York. It is such a joke because the names of the streets here are clumsily lengthy and will not fit into such a small constructed street. What is worse is that local government does not even know the proper names of streets. What in heaven's name is Alexandra Road in Ikoyi? We know Alexander Avenue. Carelessness and sloppiness, buildings, so much talk of a Brazilian-inspired style that one wonders where the old Lagos design has disappeared to, the ones before the incursion of the foreign style. What, for example, was the influence of the Benin on the way buildings were designed? I am tempted to think that Lagos is a relatively new contraption. Now, I'll ask my panelists to respond to that. But I think that, again, I don't think it's bad to be inspired by other spaces. I think that we live in a globalized world, increasingly interconnected. We're learning from different spaces, and we're learning how to navigate our own space through seeing how other people have done things and how other people, learning from mistakes as well and seeing how we want to go forward. Now, Fisayo has mentioned sustainability, and Mr. Adams, that's part of what I want to talk to you about, because when I look at the Loving Lagos structure, you really spent a lot of time to ensure that the renovation and the restoration of that building was done as true to the original structure as before, and that you were thinking about multiple use for the space. You were looking at a transformative space so that it has different elements to it. And you mentioned to me when we spoke that for you, the key thing is that this thing can stand the test of time and be sustainable, right? And I know that you're also planning ahead for the future. So when we talk about sustainability from a Loving Lagos perspective, right? And I'm sorry, guys, I'm a tourism person, so tourism always has to come in. I'm sorry, right? When we talk about it from a Loving Lagos perspective, how do we ensure that whatever it is that we're trying to rebrand Lagos as, right? And this is coming back to my opportunities question, which you promised that you're going to answer. How do we ensure that this rebranding is able to last and stand the test of time such that it is actually almost timeless?
Well, I think it's pretty obvious. We're not trying to create anything new. We're just trying to tell the old story. And we've discovered a gap, and the gap is, why aren't people reading, learning the history? And for us, I think that's the greatest, downside to all of this, because we are now the ones taking over the creative spaces where there's the music, there's film. What's feeding all of that? Some real history must feed that. You need to learn about your people. And even to address the issue of you need to know the history as a start point. That is where the inspiration, the creativity has to come from. And then for us, it's just for us to find a way to get that message across. Our target are young Nigerians. And even I, in my generation Y, I still have a challenge reading, not to talk about generations after. Spend all the time on your phones and how much time do you have to be reading one lengthy history book? We would like it summarized. We probably like to hear it, so I would like it cropped up into like 3 pages or things like that. But if we can find a way to get this message across, for instance, the issue of being creative, talk about the fashion industry. When you talk about what were Africans wearing initially, of course, Africans used to roam around the earth naked. But along the line, they started influences from the different contacts or people that they came across, even the Europeans, started influencing that. And it started changing. So that's why you'd find, there's this beautiful agbada that a king wore over 100 years ago. But the material was from Liverpool or wherever. But that design did not come from Liverpool. It came from here. So we need to appreciate that even with the houses, there's the issue about, well, the houses are European. We all know that before colonialism or even during the Benin, our houses were mud and thatched roof. There's no hard and fast rule about it. There's nothing major about that. Maybe much later we started, and then maybe after the Brazilian returnees came, they started adding a bit more to that. That's our history. There's nothing comes from nowhere. So, and our understanding of that and the progression, in my opinion, is what we need to start to look at. And that's where we should be drawing the inspiration for our music, for our cinema, for our movies, for our arts, from all of that. And we'll be able to refer to certain times in our history to say, this is where, and it will be limitless, because that's where we were, because it gets to a point that, you start to wonder, have we exhausted all the opportunities? Have we all the possibilities? But it's limitless. And just like they said, in a city like Lagos, it started off with, obviously there were people here, they migrated to the southern part. Then the Benin came. They came with all their own culture and all their ways of doing things, which was infused into the local, and assimilation or thereabout. They came to a certain position, and it has grown from there. All others came. The British came, the Dutch came, the Portuguese, and then the rest of Nigeria moved into Lagos, and it's a melting pot. And if we are able to, find our way back and find out how all these things added up and to where we are now, that really is the prize for us. And I don't think it's an impossible task.
Thank you so much for that. And I've been reading the comments. Please keep them coming. I will read some of them, but also if you're here, please try reading some of the comments, and I will ask a couple of people. I've seen some interesting comments to kind of share a little bit more on what they're trying to say. It's interesting because every panel I'm on, actually, I'm still with Mr. Adams, so let me stay with him. Every panel that I'm on or any conversation now just talks about the importance of us going back to our history. Even this morning we had a conversation on history and tourism. No matter whatever we are talking about Lagos or even Nigeria, whenever we're trying to talk about development, is this question of we must go back to history and we must look back to history. But then the question is, where is the history and how do we access this history, right? You mentioned reading books, but again, how does this history, how are we able to evolve the consumption of history in digestible chunks for the modern age and for the modern world? I know Loving Lagos has really tried to do a little bit of that, a lot of that actually, in terms of your space, in terms of curating some artifacts, but even in terms of, like you said, you were hosting Mr. Shukwashashore when he was talking about his journey of an African colony. Can you share a little bit more about why where you see the consumption of history going? Especially as you said, people don't really want to read, not because we don't like reading. I think that people like reading, but perhaps the time, the frenzied nature of Lagos, reality of Lagos, we don't have that luxury. What are your own reflections on that?
Well, you see, it's unfortunate that we live in times where people twist things or they say things to suit themselves. We should be the driving force for people to really want to know the truth. The truth is that you probably wouldn't get and maybe that's a challenge. You won't get the full picture in one book. So you must have the passion to read different books and to come up with what you think. And it doesn't matter. Like they say in the history of Lagos that a lot of it is folklore. So, a lot of it is contested. That's part of the history. That's part of the beauty. So one man says, Gufumini cut somebody's head and he rolled down and all of that. you know, of course, I mean, in this day and age, you know what is real and what isn't. But you know, it's fun reading that. Someone like Shupo Shashore made the point of referring to sources that could be vetted, verified. It's quite ironic because there he is on one hand talking about how they ripped us and all of that, but all of the information that he has actually comes from that. That's the irony, you know, and that's what we need to appreciate and live by. We're not going to change that. So there are different books. There's a new book called The Formation is coming out now. It tells you the history of Nigeria from 1914 to 19, from the beginning to 1914. Other people have told you the story from amalgamation till date, and then you can add your own piece. The history is there. It's the time, it's how you digest it, it's what you make of it, and it's fun to actually have different opinions about it. Sit, talk about it, and then agree on what sounds. So what we've tried to do, and you know, that's the thing about being an entrepreneur. You're pushed to doing more and more that spreads you thin. So all we want to do is do tourism. We found ourselves in the history business. We're collecting books. We're meeting with authors. We buy books regularly. Once we hear a different version, we want to check it out and all of that. I mean, even curating the information we have. My intention was to go to the universities and get, you know, lecturers. But I discovered that, you know, like the lady said, it's like we work in silos. This information, they're there, but you know, it's just information in a capsule. How do you connect all of this to make one big story? And that's the challenge. And we should not be shy to do that now. Now we know you wake up and a lot of Nigerians now, after watching Shupo Shashore, and they're like, you know, you mean this was what happened? You mean when Nigeria was just like a business? You mean this? Some people will tell you they didn't even know Herbert Macaulay was a black man, that they thought he was a white man. Eric Moore is a white man. You know, things like that. It's almost embarrassing, but you begin to see how serious a problem we have, you know. So yes, we need to educate ourselves. For me, just like our focus is cultural tourism, heritage, and all of that. But we discovered that being at such an early stage of it, when you were trying to present it to be palatable, to be consumable for the average tourist, we discovered that we need to do a bit of, we need to clean it out a bit. In its raw form, it might not be so attractive. I mean, who wants to sit in the hot sun to go and watch one Egungun Fest? It's really, you know, they're attempting to beat you. It is hot, it is loud, and all of that. We must find a way to refine some of it without taking anything out that makes it, you know, enjoyable for the average tourist. We now have places, you would see individual efforts to make this happen. I think it's not just a case of looking towards government. I think we all have a responsibility to make sure everybody succeeds, that has, in a way, contributed or is passionate about this. I mean, I went to a place like several years ago, La Campagne Tropicana, and one thing I still hold till today, not necessarily about how beautiful the place is, it's the mindset of the people that work there, the villagers. They've got a real welcoming mindset that, look, each person that comes here must leave happy. It's a rare thing in a city that is this crazy for you to do that. And that till tomorrow is the credit that I give to the proprietor of that organization. And these are the things that I think we need to look at. Yes, it's crazy, but you know, there are opportunities to take. And I keep making the case of look at our situation and look at West Africa. We are the richest. Lagos is the most modern, most advanced city in the region. But if you ask the average tour person that wants to come on a tour, where would you want to go to? They'll choose Benin. They will choose Ghana. They will choose, but why is that? It's not because of money. It's just the mindset when the people decide, you know what, I want to make this work. I want to make it happen, and I'm collaborating with other people to make this happen. So, yeah.
Thank you. I can really see the passion, and it's very contagious, really, in what you're trying to do. And I honestly can only hope and pray that Loving Lagos continues to grow and continues to achieve what it wants to achieve. It's a difficult topic that we've been given, actually, and I think we've tried to do it some justice. You know, I'm going to just highlight a couple of the comments here and hopefully end on a positive note. So Laolu says, Lagos is a maze with frenzied people thrown in. and the main thinking in the Atlantic by the second at the same time. Okay. Adekunle says it's a city of possibilities and dreams. All things are possible in Lagos. Yegua says it's Jaga Jaga, but perhaps the interesting thing, and I like what Yegua wrote, is that, is it a mess to engage with as opposed to a mess to tidy? I think that's also questions that we need to ask ourselves, that what does it mean to engage? And what does it mean to tidy? And particularly from, if we're looking at branding it even now for residents, right? Because that's our focus here first. Even if we talk about tourism, domestic tourism, how are we branding Lagos for other Nigerians? You know, we start to really think about, you know, can the Jaga Jaga-ness of Lagos be its USP almost? But then, going back to what Mr. Adams has just said, within that Jaga Jaga, you really don't want to come somewhere and just have to deal in a maze that is frenzied. You want to know that you can enjoy Lagos for a day or 2 days or 3 days. Maybe if you live in Lagos, you then experience the Jaga Jaga. But it's important that we are also, as different professionals, able to create a curated experience of Lagos for our visitors, for our friends, for our family members. And it will take us a lot of work. And these, I think, are the opportunities. You know, Mr. Lawan has explained some of the opportunities in distilling a lot of our history and bringing it in palatable chunks for people, opportunities in trying to say, how do we curate the different spaces in Lagos, you know, Lagos Island, etc. You also mentioned something even about our, you know, our history. So Herbert Macaulay, Eric Moore, I still think there's an opportunity for someone to come up with a tourism product of street name tours. You know, who was Adetokunbo Ademola? Who was Eric Moore?
Yeah.
Who was Eriko Abayomi? You know, maybe Yellow of Lagos, I don't know, Loving Lagos. You know, let's come up with a catalog of something and just to explain all these people you read. You know, I've read about them because I'm always curious that, oh my God, who was this Oyinkansola Abayomi lady? And then find out that, you know, her husband died. She was Mr. Abayomi, then she remarried again to another Abayomi, you know, and those things are very interesting, right? But again, you have to look for it. And this maze of ours, like Laulu has said, perhaps we need to make it easy to solve. And only those that want to do the, you know, you can have the easy course, the medium course, and then you can have the hard course for those that really want to delve deep down. So I think those are where some of the opportunities lie. I think that there's really also a lot of work in how we interrelate and interact with our policymakers. I feel like they need a lot of guidance in how to even start to come up with a vision for Lagos. Because once we have a vision, it's like a leader. Once you set a vision, people know that they can follow you, they can key in. But in a vision organization, everyone is just going about in a Jaga Jaga format. Diego, sorry, this is me saying maybe this to be a bit more structured. But Fisa, your closing parting words. Oh, people are typing. Sorry, I can't multitask. Okay, so Fika says, following on from Lawan's last comment, is the problem not that Nigeria is not unspoiled? Well, there's a lot of negative, not that Nigeria is not unspoiled. So that is the fact that Nigeria is spoiled. Has our past cash flow deceived us into spending and destroying our scenery? Perhaps a little poverty might have done us some good. You know what they say about, you know, when your father is very wealthy, you don't have to think. I think that's what's happened to us. And maybe sometimes it's good that our fathers should not let us know how wealthy we are so that we can think. So if you say, before I go to you, I see that Perpetua has written something that is actually quite romantic. It says, Lagos to her is many things, full of characters, full of people. Some days she feels lost whilst navigating or struggling. It's loud, full of life, a contagious spirit, sometimes annoying, a good sense of Lagos while cruising on a bike with a group of friends, even when it's a congested, rough or smooth street. Lagos is vibrant, it's fun and alive. There's a strong presence of history left behind our colonial masters as you cruise through some areas, which still brings life, and that it's difficult to narrow down, but she loves Lagos, and therefore the branding has to be original, true, and native. Well, Perpetua, I think you need to move from being a doctor to helping us with our branding. This is like a really nice meandering of, you know, beautiful, beautiful, beautiful moment. Fisa, before I go to Mr. Adams, I would just like to hear your own comments on just, you know, reflections on how we move forward and what the future for Yellow of Lagos is, particularly reflecting on a post-lockdown, post-EndSARS. Not post-EndSARS, but post-EndSARS protest, right? I don't even know, not post, you know what? Thinking about what we've gone through in 2020, right? With COVID, with EndSARS, etc. Where's Yellow of Lagos going and what can we expect to see in terms of branding Lagos?
Okay, I need you guys to put your seatbelts on because it's going to be a little bumpy for the next 5 minutes. The idea that we are trying to harness is to create 3D experiences of the Lagos essence. So if you take, for example, a market scene, and you want to put that into the built environment, you're coming to a museum of sorts, an interactive museum. Let's just create that picture in your mind. And one of the scenes is like a market scene. We'll be creating or recreating certain parts of Lagos within the built environment. So instead of you having to travel or journey to these places, all of these different facets of Lagos would be there. Perhaps the interior of the Church of Christ that is in Marina, on Lagos Island, would be something that inspires a space that you walk into. So let's just say it's a warehouse as opposed to like a building. It's more horizontal in length and breadth. So we're hoping to partner obviously with the government on such a project. And we've kind of had different capsules of experiences for brands and for our own selves, where we've merged culture and conversation for different brands. We've done activations. It's been a good bumpy ride for 4 years, and that's pretty much where we're going to park and start building the narrative. I believe in institutionalization, such a long word. So the museums that are popping up on Lagos Island now, I think it's going in the right direction of honing this narrative. But beyond that, it's also making history relatable. So when the book was launched in January, what we did was we created an illustrated city guide. So literally, ideally, you will pick it up at the airport, for example, and you will thumb through different icons, different buildings, different foods. Everything is pretty much packed in that book for you. It's the A to Z of Lagos. That's the title. That's the name of the book. And basically, everything you need to know as a beginner or someone that is interested in history, somebody that's interested in culture, is in there for you. And it rids itself of any other brands. So it basically puts Lagos as its own brand without the influence of other yellow brands like MTN or brands like, I don't know, Coca-Cola. None of these brands exist in the book. It's literally the Lagos experience documented in a book format. And so I strongly believe in history, as was said earlier. I'm not sure if we all know this, but history has been removed from our curriculum. And so one of the things that we are trying to do is advocate for the introduction of history. And what I'm doing personally behind the scenes is working with an institutional facility right now to start teaching pre-colonial Nigerian art history. And I think it's important for us to go back into the past without the colonial masters or the researchers that were sent from the colonial administration, and without their own narratives, to kind of see what life was way back when, before the interference. Because you can't tell me that my history started by was started by the inscriptions of a John Doe. I can't understand that my history, the history of my lineage or locations or immigration or migration or communication, started by someone from the West coming to document for me. I believe that that also has a lot to do with the altering of our narrative. And so what I'm trying to do with the Yellow of Lagos, at some point in time, is my own kind of personal project that I've embarked on since the EndSARS movement and the Lekki Toll massacre, is to do whatever I can to make history accessible and to make it such that it whets the appetite of the audience and they begin to ask questions and formulate their own paths to finding answers by going back. And people that don't know their history are doomed to repeat it, and it'll continue to happen generation after generation if we don't stop it and nip it in the bud now. And so through the vehicles of culture and education, we're trying to bring history back into the classrooms. We're trying to bring it into the forefront of the minds of every single civilian, right from the grassroots, because you will not be proud of who you are unless you know where you're coming from. And so creating some sort of institution for learning, museum interaction, making sure that history is brought back into the classrooms, and also documenting and making our archives digitized so it's accessible by everyone at any point in time. These three things are what we're focusing on for the future of the Yellow of Lagos.
Wow, Fisayo. Wow, well done. I think that the future is really bright. It's really yellow, and it's really going to be very busy, but sounds very good. And we'll be looking at coming back to you at as Open House Lagos in terms of how you also want to continue these things. But what you mentioned, particularly about the history is, I think they said it's back in the curriculum. I don't know, the last I heard it wasn't, but I also think that sometimes we can't always be waiting for government. I think it's important, like you're trying to do, to see how we can have extracurricular activities, to see how we can have history clubs, to see how we can also sometimes hack what already exists, right? And say that way you don't have to always wait for these things to go through the formal processes. We can literally, nothing stops, starting to disseminate pamphlets and having clubs, like I said, for school children after school to learn. And so we also need to come up with creative ways. I think that art, the cultural and creative sector, which includes architecture, has a strong role to play, even as we try to articulate our vision for the future. But there's another thing, and this is where I'll come to Mr. Adams, in terms of there's something very strong about merchandising and how merchandising contributes to the branding of the city. And a lot of the time when one is trying to look at Lagos, right, and the merchandising available, and I'm looking at what you're trying to do with Loving Lagos here and some of the conversations, like I said, that we've had. What's the future in terms of merchandising? Sometimes you have friends that you want to go take things, send them things, and a lot of it is not as beautiful or packaged or labeled or branded as it could to be to represent Lagos. What would you say Loving Lagos is trying to do in terms of enhancing the quality of our merchandising? Because that's a good way to brand our city. You have those I Love New York postcards. You go to different countries in the world, there are postcards, there are t-shirts, there are artifacts, there's jewelry, there's so many different things that you can use. What would you say as your own reflection, and then also for what Loving Lagos is planning to do for the future? What would you say, merchandising as a branding tool, what would you say Loving Lagos is trying to do regarding that? Okay, and please respond your reflection based on what you have said about, culture and fabrics, right? We've spoken a little bit about that as well.
Oh yeah, it's interesting you said this, because for us, the first thing that we wanted to achieve was to get the right, the right message out about what we are about, what we're doing. And when you've done that, people would now start to ask, yeah, what can I get from you? We had some viewings, some screening of program of documentaries, and some of the there were books that were written by the producer of the film, and that really got us thinking about just what you said, merchandising now. As we speak, hopefully by next week we should open a gift store, a souvenir shop, and we had to wait this long because it's like we always say, it's about partnerships. It's not just bringing the idea or whatever. You need to know that you've got the right people, and you need to have taken in some information, some data from people asking what they want to buy certain things from you. Take, for instance, we had to go all the way into Lagos Island near the Obas Palace to search for damask, the old damask, so people can relive, they can recount, that kind of experience whereby they could come to our facility where the agbada, like the kings used to wear, take pictures. And they also have the opportunity to buy some of those things, from adire to damask to, all those kind of fabric. Then games that are Nigerian themed, books on Nigeria, history, fiction and non-fiction, music, whatever we need to do, but, trying to look for things that are within our scope, So it's taken all this long, but, by God's grace, within the next week or thereabouts, we should be able to kick that off. And that would be an interesting thing. And we've met a lot of people along the line that are happy to support us, with stuff. And that's been quite encouraging. And for us, you don't do these things out of passion. That's why this part had to wait this long. It's got to make economic sense. It's got to be something that would be rewarding. So it's either you do it or you're doing something you're offering a service for free. So for us, we had to wait until we could see real value in it before we decided to go into that. Now, so that we don't lose, what this is all about, like you said, with the branding, it's how you want people to see your city and how you're going to do that in very, very few words and in the kind of things that you put into your city. So for us, like I said, we looked at it and we're like, the best way to tell our stories, or the story of Lagos, which ultimately comes into the story of Nigeria. And that's the beauty of it. You cannot tell the story of Lagos without telling the story of Nigeria, because its history kicked off from Lagos. And those are the kind of things that we try to promote so that people can see that Lagos is a part of Nigeria that they all share a history out of. So they must, take ownership of that. And the fact that so many people have come, take for instance, our building at Onikon. By the time we researched the history, we discovered that the house was originally built by a Saro descendant. A Saro descendant is someone that came from Sierra Leone, got off a slave ship, the slave ship that could not get as far upfield to where they were meant to take the human cargo to, got off the slave ship, took them back to Sierra Leone, and somehow they found their way back to Lagos. They were educated, they were the prize, they were the toast of the day, so to speak. And this is where the history is interesting. This Saro man decides to build a house, or the Saro descendant decides to build a house. He builds a house in Brazilian style architecture. So for us, as I hear you talk about, the difficulty in, building houses in Lagos, the theme and all of that, it's right there. Someone has come and done that. He did not go and build a house like he saw in Sierra Leone or in the UK. He came and he engaged a local craftsman whose training was in Brazilian architecture, which was the theme of the day in those days, in 1930 something. So you have that. Now, the palaces of the chiefs and kings in Lagos Island, the history of the king is from Benin. His chiefs, some of them are from Benin, and the local chiefs are from Lagos. Most of their palaces have Portuguese architecture. And this is where I say, when you understand the history, you begin to take, and I tell people, from the history of Lagos, you can easily lay claim to Brazilian culture, to Portuguese culture, Spanish culture, everything along the west coast of Africa is all yours, because it's been brought here at a point in time, and you can lay claim to it. So for us not to have a theme to our building, I just find it, I can't even, think. So we have all of that. Anyway, back to loving Lagos. So for us, it's important that we tell the story. Like I said, the challenge was, where do you tell the story from? We've had challenges in the past whereby we take people to certain venues, and then it's a challenge accessing those venues on the days that we're doing our tours. So we tell you, let us own our own place, our own venues, whether we're owning it outright or we're renting it. But give the people, and I'll give you one instance. We have a place on Catholic Mission Street. Not too long ago, I did a video, and I played some Portuguese and Spanish music in the background. And because I was filming the neighborhood, and it was all these, Portuguese and Brazilian-inspired houses. People were sending us private chats asking, "Where is this? Is this Havana? Is this?" But you see the difference that makes just by playing music and showing this pre-colonial structures could take people's mind that far, and that's the opportunity. So for us, we are going to keep increasing our footprint in Lagos Island and telling that story. There's the Brazilian story, like I said. There's the Brazilian returnee story. There's the Saro returnee story. There's the indigenous Lagos story. And for us, tourism is an experience. It's not just one place. It's not just enough to take them to like a lovely Lagos. And by the way, by the things you said about having the streets of Lagos, Eric Moore, and all of that, I think it's been a while since you last came to lovely Lagos. We already have that on our boards as well. So that could be a good experience as well, because we thought, let's tell the history of the streets as well, the names behind those streets for some of those popular streets. So for us is to connect all these places. So you have that experience, and it's something that we don't have to really think much about because they are there already. It's just to use those structures to tell the stories. And for us, it's also to find a way to give back, to also educate, to empower the young lads, to train them in tourism so that they too are proud of their communities. And instead of us having to look for people to do the tours, the boys from the neighborhood would take up that responsibility. Take, for instance, our place in Catholic Mission. We've waited about 2 years to get the buy-in of the Brazilian descendants community and to partner with them on that, because we can't tell their story without them being part of it. So we've been able to achieve that. In Lagos Island, close to the Obas Palace, is the same process. I mean, the chiefs are there, we know them, and it's so that you can connect everything. People can take you and see the most beautiful parts of Lagos. You can see the galleries, you can see all of that, because an example is Dubai. You see the beautiful part. The last day of your tour is usually you go into the desert to do the sand, and they tell you their history or whatever they can about their history. So even though we're trying to say in Lagos that we're a modern city, we're modern people, we're forward-thinking people, there's also a history that drives the people that are here, that have come here. Whether you came here yesterday or you came here 100 years ago or whatever, there's a history that drives that. And I think we should also promote that. So for us, is to connect all these different things. I remember when we had workmen coming to our beachfront site, they would go for hours and we wouldn't be able to find them. And these are workmen that probably came from Ogun State or thereabouts. And when we eventually find them, we just find them sitting at the beach, marveling. And we're like, what's the big deal about the beach? And they'll tell you that they've never seen the ocean before. So that just tells you the opportunities we have in this country. There are hordes and hordes of people that have never seen the ocean before. And the whole coast of Lagos is the ocean front. So, these are the opportunities that we want to keep on and keep at. And growing, the opportunity to show people different parts of Lagos, colonial, pre-colonial, post-colonial, whatever they want to see. And, generally growing that business in that direction. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you for sharing all the various things that you're doing. I feel like both you and Fisayo are doing so much over the next course of the year and for the future. We look forward to a lot of collaborations between Yellow of Lagos and Loving Lagos, and even other components, Open House Lagos, Nothing to Do in Lagos, Find Your Lagos, Lost in Lagos. There's so much happening, and I think it'll be good for us to all come together to start to really then, coalesce and drive our direction forward. So thank you so much to my panelists. I would like to give you a round of applause here. So I think we're all just giving you a round of applause in our homes. I'm not sure you can. Oh yeah, you can react. So please give a round of applause. I have given my round of applause. Thank you so much, our panelists. Thank you so much to our participants, particularly on a Sunday evening. This is prime time to do other things, get ready for the week. Thank you so much for devoting your time here to spend here, to share, to learn. Thank you for engaging. And hopefully we have given you some challenges. We have spoken about some opportunities, and all of this is going to bring us together to see how we can close the circle, how we can close the loop, how we can connect the dots to really get the Lagos that we want to get and to live the lives that we want to live. I know that going forward, Open House Lagos has another plan. So if you just check our website, there's another plan going up soon. And for those of you that are joining us on YouTube, thank you so much for joining. You can leave comments and questions there as well. Thank you and have a lovely evening. Goodbye, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.